Today I'm going to be making the smaller version of the Paphos pouch, but for both the large and small version, you will need exactly the same pattern pieces. So for the main exterior, make sure that you are cutting them larger than your pattern template. So cut 2 of your main exterior as well as 2 stabilizers. And that is to make sure that you will have the extra space, because after you've quilted, it's going to shrink a little bit. Then you need to cut 2 lining pieces, 1 strap and 1 side tab, as well as a ruffle. Now these 3 are completely optional, so if you want to add these, do cut them. If you don't want to add them, you don't have to worry about cutting them at all. For the hardware, you are going to need a zipper tape and a pull to go with it, and then you're also going to need a D-ring, which is for your handle. So once you have all of your materials, let's get into it. We are going to begin by preparing our main exterior panel, and depending on the stabilizer that you have chosen, you can either fuse it to the wrong side of your fabric, or you can use a spray adhesive to hold your fabric to your stabilizer and then quilt it. Today I've got some fusible foam, so I'm going to use my iron to fuse it to the wrong side of the fabric first. I want to make sure that the glue is facing up, and then I'm going to place my fabric wrong side down and center it roughly over the top, and I'm going to take my hot iron and just press it into place. And I'm going to keep the iron in that same position for roughly 8 seconds and then keep on moving along until I have my whole fabric panel fused to my stabilizer. And let's repeat the same with the second panel. Now that the fabric is stuck to the stabilizer, now we can quilt this. And there are so many ways in which you can quilt this. So in the pattern instructions I have on how you can do a diamond stitch line, and that is basically just connecting one corner to the other, and then at regular intervals you start making stripes all the way down, and then from the opposite corners you would do the same and make the same regular intervals in the other direction. But for today I want to keep this more simple, and I'm just going to do vertical lines, so from top to bottom of my pouch. You can also do free motion quilting, horizontal lines, whatever you wish to do. Just pick a quilting design you like and just go with it. Because I'm going to go with a vertical stitch line to help me keep it straight, I'm taking a ruler and a piece of chalk, and I'm drawing a line from top to bottom roughly down the middle of my panel, and I'm going to repeat this for both panels. Now I'm only drawing one vertical line because I have a special little tool for my sewing machine, which is a quilting guide, and that is going to help me keep my spaces regular between all of the lines. Now if you don't have one of these little tools, there's no problem at all. What you can do is just continue with your ruler and draw lines at regular intervals, and then you will just stitch on top of those. But I'm going to be using this tool today. We are going to be stitching now through a thick layer of fabric and foam, and to make our stitches look extra nice and give them some space on the project, I'm going to be lengthening my stitch length to a 3.5. If you're using something thinner than foam, you could maybe use a stitch length of 3, because it will just make the stitches look a lot prettier. Now I'm just going to install my quilting guide, and I'm going to just insert it here at the back of my presser foot, and I'm going to be using a 1-inch interval between all of my stitch lines. Now that both of my panels are quilted, I can grab my paper template and start cutting out my panels. And I'm going to use one of these straight edges to keep in line with my stitch line so that I can get this cut as perfectly straight as I can, because what I don't want is that my stitch lines lie kind of to the side. So I want to make sure they lie straight. Now that these are cut to size, I can set them aside and get on to the next step. Grab your zipper tape and make sure that you cut it down to size now. If you are using a ready-made zipper, make sure the zipper pull is on the inside of the cut and don't cut it off. And if you need to add a zipper pull, make sure that we do it now before we move on from here. So open the zip up a little bit, and then take the zipper pull and add it here. So with the widest part where it is more open, add that to the zipper teeth. Now there are lots of tips and techniques to do this, and this is just the way that I find the easiest, which is just putting them both in at the same time, trying to get them in the groove there and then squiggling them up together. Now grab these zipper tabs, and you are going to take 2 tabs and you are going to sandwich the end of one side of the zipper between these two. If you have a wrong and a right side, make sure that you have the right side, so the pretty sides facing each other, and you sandwich the zipper just in the center like that, and place a couple of pins or clips to keep that in place, and then repeat the same for the other end. On the previous step we had our stitch length at a 3.5, or maybe you used a 3. Make sure that you set it down now to a 2.4 or 2.6 so that we can sew the zipper tabs to the end of the zipper tape. Position the edge of the zipper that is sandwiched between the zipper tabs with the 1/4 inch mark that you have on your needle plate and sew that together, and then repeat the same for the other end. Now you can open up the zipper tabs and fold them wrong sides together, and if you want to, you can add a decorative stitch here, so you can top stitch close to the folded edge, roughly about 1/8 of an inch away. And if you do choose to do this, make sure that you lengthen your stitch length to about a 3, just so that the stitches look a lot prettier, and then you can set the zip aside for the next step. If you're adding the side tab and the handle, go ahead, grab that now, as well as your iron, and we are going to fold them wrong sides together and press it in half to create a center crease. Even if you don't want to add a handle but just want to add the side tab to hang a little charm on, you can of course do that as well. We are going to be preparing the side tab as well as the handle in exactly the same manner, so repeat the same steps for both. Fold them in half, wrong sides together, and press, because we want to have a center crease in the middle as a guide. Then open it up and take one of the long raw edges and fold it in to meet that center crease and press again. We are just creating a guide now to put our interfacing down. Now open up that last fold that we've just created, take the interfacing and align the raw edge of the interfacing with that crease, and that will help you get it exactly centered. Once you have it in its place, you can then fuse it together and repeat the same for the side tab. Now that we've fused the interfacing on, let's go ahead and fold in those long raw edges, and using the edge of the interfacing as a guide, just fold them over like that to meet in the center and press them again. And again, we're repeating this for both the side tab as well as the handle. Once you've folded in the long edges over into the center, we're going to refold it, and we are going to create that center crease again just by pressing it. And once you have done that, you can clip it in place so it holds, and then we'll take it over to the sewing machine. A few of the testers for the Paphos Pouch didn't use interfacing in the handles, and they said it worked out completely fine. I just prefer to use it just to give it that extra strength and that extra sturdiness. So this adding interfacing to the handles is completely up to you. And this is what we have right now. So on the one side, you will see you have 2 folded edges, and on the other, you will just have the 1 folded edge. We're going to top stitch the handle and the side tab in place, and because we're going to be top stitching, make sure that you lengthen your stitch length to a 3mm, because it will just make them look a lot nicer. Now you can also here top stitch down both sides or just down one side, but if you're just going to top stitch down the one side, make sure that you're doing it down the side where you have the 2 folded edges, so that you close them and that they don't stay open. Now position a folded edge of your side tab or handle with the 1/8 inch mark on your needle plate, and use that as a guide to sew down all the sides. And this is what it looks like top stitching down both sides of the folded edges. Now grab your side tab as well as your D-ring, and we are going to thread the side tab through the D-ring. If you have a side that you prefer your stitches on, make sure that you fold those right side out and keep the less nice stitches on the inside. So thread it through your D-ring and match the raw edges, and then we are going to sew roughly 3/8 of an inch or 1/2 inch away from the D-ring. So whatever space your presser foot allows you to stitch away from the D-ring, that's what we're going to do. Make sure here that you backstitch at the beginning and end of your row of stitches, because you want to keep your D-ring in place so that it doesn't shift up and down on you. And this is what it looks like right now. So just go and cut these loose threads off to make it look neat, and then we can set the side tab as well as the handle aside for a later step. Now for the ruffle. If you're making the larger pouch and you had to cut your ruffle in 2 pieces to accommodate the width of your fabric, make sure that first you are sewing those pieces together. So put them right sides together, aligning the short edges, and sew using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then you can press the seam open and then treat it as a continuous length. Once you have that, or if you are doing the smaller version, then you can take 1 short edge, fold them right sides together, matching those short edges, and then we are going to sew across using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we are going to repeat the same for both of the short edges. Now on the sewing machine, make sure that you set your stitch length back down to a 2.4, and then you can align the short raw edge of your ruffle with the 1/4 inch guide on your needle plate and sew down both ends. And this is what you have right now. So you should have your two short edges sewn together. Now for the corner, so we can turn them right sides out, you can just snip that corner off. Or what I'm going to do is just going to fold that back by the stitch line. I'm going to hold it down with one finger and I'm going to push it out with my thumb over to the right side, and I'm just going to wiggle that corner out, and I will have a straight edge. So it's your preference, either cut it or fold it back and push it out. Now go over to your iron and match the long raw edges of the ruffle together, and then press so you can create a center crease to make the ruffle super neat, so that we can sew our gathering stitches on. Now to create the gathering stitches, I always suggest to sew 2 rows of stitches, because it will just make it stronger and it will also make it neater for when you do gather those stitches, and will create yourself a channel to sew down the middle. So to do that, we are going to lengthen our stitch length to the maximum that your sewing machine allows, and my sewing machine is a 5mm length. So I'm going to do that and sew 2 rows of gathering stitches, one at an 1/8 of an inch distance from the raw edge and the other one at a 1/2 inch distance from the raw edge. Something super important here is you want to make sure that you have thread on both ends. So at the beginning and the end of your row of stitches, you want to have about 10 centimeters of thread, so that you can actually have something to pull on to create your gathers. So if you don't have any thread hanging out the back of your presser foot, just make sure you grab a bit and pull it roughly 10 centimeters and just let it hang to the back. And this is what you should have now. So 2 parallel rows of stitches close to the raw edge of the fabric. Now to gather your ruffle, you are going to have to separate all of your threads at one of the ends, and you are going to grab hold of either the top 2 threads or the bottom threads, whichever is your preference, and pull on the threads with one hand, and with the other hand pull the fabric in the other direction, and then you will see your fabric start to gather. What I tend to do is I gather the ruffle from one side about halfway, and then I'll go on to the other side and gather it the other half. I feel it's easier for me this way to do it half and half, because like that the fabric goes a shorter distance over the thread, and it just basically divides the job for each side. To know how much we are gathering this ruffle in, grab one of your main exterior pieces and from the top of the panel measure down 1/2 inch. If you are using a directional print, make sure that it is facing the right way up before you attach the ruffle. So my ruffles don't escape, what I'm going to do on one of the ends, I'm going to tie a knot in the threads before I attach it to my panel. So I'm just going to double knot it here at the one end. Now with the raw edge of my ruffle, I'm going to match it with the raw edge of my exterior panel, and I'm going to put the edge that we sewed earlier on up against that 1/2 inch mark from the top, and I'm just going to place a couple of clips there to begin with, and then I am going to continue matching the ruffle down the raw edges. At the corners, I'm going to try and follow that as best as I can, and I'm going to go right around up until the other mark on the other side. If I need to let out the ruffles a little bit, I will have enough thread on the other side to let them out, and I'll just see how I like my gathers, if they're evenly spread out, and I'll just go from there. I'm ever so slightly short. I'm just going to let out my ruffle by a tiny bit, just so that I can reach that mark at the top there. Once you have your gathers all attached, just give it a quick look and see if they are evenly gathered and if you like how it's looking. If not, go back and adjust it, and if you're ready to stitch it down, let's head over to the sewing machine. Now check that your stitch length is set back down to a 2.4, and then we are going to use the 1/4 inch mark on our needle plate as a guide to put the raw edge of our fabric, and we are going to stitch right down the middle of that channel, and that is going to allow us to stitch our ruffles in place a lot more evenly. So this is what we have right now. We've just stitched down the ruffle to our main exterior panel, and you will see that you can still tell from the right side that you have a set of gathering stitches there. We'll leave those in for now just in case we need to do some unpicking, and that will be the last thing we remove once the bag is completed. Now grab your side tab with the D-ring attached and measure down 1.25 inches from the top of your main panel and baste it in place there. And we now have our side tab attached to our main panel. Now locate all of your lining pieces as well as your main exterior panel and the zipper as well. And we're going to start with the zipper. So cut off the excess that we have of the zipper tabs just so that the fabric is in line with the zipper tape. Now we need to find the center points on all of these panels, including the zipper. So for the zipper, we are going to fold it backwards and we are going to match the raw edges of where the fabric is and then just fold it in like that. And I know here is my center. Now you can take a marker of any sort, piece of chalk, and mark that point, but I just like to take my scissors and make a little snip here. So repeat the same for the other side of the zipper. And now we're going to do the same for the main exterior panels as well as the lining. So just fold it in half and make a little mark at the center point. We only need to mark the center points of the top of the panels because it's going to be the only area where we are going to be joining the zipper as well as the lining and the main all together. So I have now all of my centers marked as well as my zipper, and what I'm going to do first is take my zipper and a main exterior panel piece and lay them right sides together. So my zipper teeth is facing down onto the right side of my fabric, and I'm going to match those center points and put a clip there. Then I can work my way outwards and place more clips, making sure that I align the edge of my zipper tape with the raw edge of my panel. If you really want to here and you're short for time, you can already now add the lining piece over that and clip it in place as well and just sew it all together. But for more control, I prefer doing these steps separately. So first I'm going to baste my zipper to my main exterior panel and then I will add the lining. Now on the sewing machine, we're going to make use of a zipper foot. So if you have one of those, change that over. If not, there's nothing to worry about. You can still sew your zipper down in place. The only thing is that you won't be able to get as close to the zipper teeth maybe as you want to. With the zipper foot, you can get extra close to the zipper teeth if you don't want any of the zipper tape on show. But I quite like having a bit of my zipper tape on show, so I'm only going to be sewing that down with a 1/4 inch seam allowance now. If you get to a point where your zipper pull is in your way, lift the presser foot up, but make sure that you still have your needle in the fabric, and then you can just pull the zipper out of the way towards the back of the machine, lower your presser foot and continue on sewing your row of stitches. And this is what it looks like right now. So we just have a row of stitches securing our zipper to our main exterior panel. Now what we can do is grab one of the lining pieces and we can center it with those other marks, clip it in place, and again working from the middle outwards, clip the rest of the lining in place, and now we can sew it together. Make sure now that you backstitch at the beginning and end of your row of stitches and use the same seam allowance, a 1/4 inch. If you want to have less zipper tape on show, then you can use 3/8 of an inch instead, or get really up close to those zipper teeth. It's your preference here. And this is what we have right now. So we have our zipper sandwich in between a main and a lining, and let's now open it up and fold the panels wrong sides together to expose the zipper. Now I would suggest giving this area here where the zipper joins the fabric a good press, but because I am using sponge and it's a bit more bouncy, I'm just going to finger press it and hold it in place and then top stitch down close to that folded edge by about 1/8 of an inch away from it. And I'm also going to be lengthening my stitch length to a 3.5 just to give those stitches enough space because we are going to be stitching through thick layer now. To help with this step and keep the lining from creeping under and getting in your row of stitches, I would suggest just taking a clip and clipping the main and lining together towards the edge of it just to keep that out of the way. Now at the beginning of your row of stitches, if your ruffle is a little bit higher to the top and you don't exactly have enough space to start your row of stitches, just try to fold the ruffle out of the way and avoid getting that in your top stitching line. There's our row of top stitching done. So that is just holding down the lining so that it doesn't come in the way of your zipper when you are using the pouch later on. Now all of these steps that we've just done to attach the lining and the main to this side of the zipper, we're going to do exactly the same for the other side of the zipper. I love how this is coming out right now. I think the red is giving the navy such a nice pop. So this is what you should have. You should have your two main panels facing up and also seeing the right side of the zipper with that. And on the back side, you should see that you have your two mains. And if you had a print on your linings, you should be seeing the right side of the print right now. And you will see the top stitching there, which is holding that lining in place. I love how this is coming out, and I'm actually making this to match a trousers I'm making, which I will show you a little sneak peek at the end. Now we're on to our final steps to make this bag functional. So the first thing you want to do is open the zipper about halfway, because if you don't do this step now, you won't be able to turn it the right way out later on. Now take your main exterior panels and fold them right sides together, as well as your lining pieces, fold them right sides together. Now you're going to match all the raw edges, clip them in place, but leave an opening in the lining, which is going to be the hole where you're going to turn your bag the right way out. When you get to the side tabs, here where the zipper is, make sure that you're pushing the zipper tabs towards the lining and then clipping those in place. When you're clipping the corners of your ruffle, you want to make sure that you fold the ruffle towards the middle and out of the way. You don't want to be folding it towards the side, because there might be a risk that you catch it within your row of stitches, which is what you don't want. So make sure that you're just folding it towards the middle and then pressing it flat, and then you can clip them together. To make sure that you don't forget to leave the opening in the lining, maybe put a marker pen or a pen or something different from what you are already using to clip the bag together, just so that you don't forget. Make sure that you backstitch a couple of times at the beginning and end where those markers are, just to strengthen the stitches for when you're pulling the bag the right way out. Reduce your stitch length to about a 2.4 or 2.6 now. And if you haven't already changed your zipper foot back to your standard foot, let's do that now. Now take your project, and we are going to use a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and position your needle at one of those markers in the lining, and that's going to be where we start. So remember to backstitch a couple of times to strengthen those stitches, and then stitch right around the whole bag and stop at the other marker. So we are reaching an area now where there's definitely a big difference in the bulk of the fabric. So what I normally do is I just take a piece of paper and fold it up to roughly the same thickness of the bulk that I'm going onto, and I put it under the presser foot to level it off. There is a special tool that you can use called a hump jumper. So if you have one, you can make use of it now. If you don't, just fold a piece of paper or even a piece of fabric to roughly the same thickness of the area you're going to be working on, and just sew like that. See how you get along. So you should have left an opening at the bottom of your lining so that we can turn the bag the right way around. But before you do that, let's just clip off all four corners. And you want to get close to the stitch line, but don't clip past the stitch line, because otherwise your stitches will unravel. So just try and get as close as you can and clip off all four corners. This is one of the most exciting parts of the project for me, because it's going to be the first moment where I get to see for the first time what my bag is going to look like. So reach in through the opening that you left in the lining and start pulling the bag from the inside out. Now, if you've used foam, it's going to be a little bit harder to do that because of all of the bulk, but just a bit of wiggling, a bit of pushing and pulling, you will manage to pull it out of that little hole. Now, once you have that the right way out, try to push out all 4 corners and as well the zipper tabs. So try to push those out as much as you can. Avoid using any pointy, sharp tools because you might stab or rip through your fabric. So you just want to maybe use a finger or maybe a knitting needle, something like that. Okay, so this is what we have right now. I love the way this is looking. So we just have a few more steps to go. We just need to close that hole that we've left in the lining and then lastly attach the handle. To make life easy now to close the hole in the lining, fold the raw edges towards the inside and press it flat because it's just going to be a lot more easier to stitch down. But if you just want to continue, you can also just fold it in and place a couple of pins or clips and it will do the same job. Something to think about now is if you have a specific color on the interior of your bag that is different to the thread you are using, you might want to color match that. I'm not going to worry for my project today. I'm just going to continue using my navy thread. You can also use a stitch length of 2.4, which is what we have been using for these last steps. That is absolutely fine as well. And we are going to use just about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. We want to sew close to the edge of the fabric, but making sure that we catch both of the layers of the lining so that the hole remains shut. And this is what you should have right now. It's not the straightest line I've ever sewn, but I'm just going to tuck it inside the bag and no one will see it. Now on to the final step. If you're adding the handle, take hold of that and thread it through the D-ring on your pouch. Fold it right sides together. And what I mean by this is if you have a prettier side that your stitches are looking better, make sure that that is the right side and fold them so that the raw edges match at the short ends. Now with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, sew these short ends together. Now clip all of these loose threads to make the ends neater so that they don't show for our next step. Now turn the seam towards the inside and slide it over to where the D-ring is. Then fold that seam over the D-ring and hold it in place. What we want to do now is just secure that seam within the stitch line, and we also want to be careful with how close we get to the D-ring because we don't want to break the needle. So there's no exact specific measurement here. Use the edge of your presser foot as a guide and get it close to where the D-ring is. It doesn't have to go over the D-ring because you probably won't be able to stitch properly anyway, but just use that as a guide and lower your presser foot. And then just stitch a row of stitches, back stitch at the beginning and end, and that will be your handle secured. And that's it, you've just sewn a Paphos pouch. I really hope you enjoyed sewing this one with me today, and as promised, here is my trousers that I have made as a matching set to wear with my bag. That's it for me today, bye for now.